Hey there! Today we are revisiting the RTX 2060 mobile in a bunch of newer games that have been released lately, or at least way after this GPU has been released. And before we start, just some quick info on the use system. For today's video we are actually going to use my personal laptop, the Asus TUF A15 from 2020 with a Ryzen 7 4800H, which was, to my knowledge, the fastest CPU the RTX 2060 mobile was combined with. Then we have 16GB of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM. In this case, several SSDs since I've upgraded my laptop a bit, and I also modded the bottom of the case with a Dremel for better airflow. Now at the point of its release, the RTX 2060 mobile was Nvidia's slowest RTX graphics card they offered, especially the weaker Max-Q version, only to be beaten later in that questionable aspect by the RTX 2050 mobile. And it was about on par with the RTX 3050 mobile while still providing 50% more VRAM, so it's clearly the better card in that aspect. It's basically the bigger sister of the GTX 1660 Ti mobile, but with ray tracing and DLSS capabilities, and was considered a solid middle-class card with 6GB of VRAM back then. All games have been tested at 1080p on Windows 11 with the newest drivers, and I'm going to do this video a bit different, as we're actually going to take a look at all the graphic presets in each game and even combine all of them with DLSS whenever available, or FSR if only that was available instead. So I actually had to do a total of around 80 to 100 benchmark runs. And I will talk about how exactly the benchmark runs were achieved before we're talking about the results just directly after that. Interestingly, despite the Ryzen 7 4800H being one of the fastest mobile CPUs back when it was released, like it was really surprising everybody at its release and winning against Intel in most benchmarks, it's definitely becoming a bottleneck in many games on medium settings or lower settings, and when using DLSS or FSR just 4 years later. My personal experience really is that, especially in laptops, after a few years, the bigger problem actually is the CPU, not the GPU. So if you plan on using your laptop for a longer period, always try to get versions with good CPUs. Alright, the first game we are looking at today is the very recent PC port of The Last of Us. It's a problematic game considering the quality of the port, and even on the pretty patched version 1.0.4.1, it's not perfect. The benchmark I applied was loading an early level and walking a bit until a cutscene happened, which I was letting finish. As you can see, I divided the results in two areas, whereas at the top we are seeing the results in the native 1080p resolution with both average and 1% lows. And at the bottom we are seeing the results with DLSS, again divided in the same way. And in all games I added this red dotted line to show the 60 FPS margin. Without DLSS, no preset in this game was able to reach an average above 60 FPS. Even the low preset only reached around 55 FPS on average, though at least the 1% lows have been okayish. With DLSS on quality, the medium preset was able to reach 61 FPS on average, but the 1% low didn't seem to benefit through DLSS. However, I personally would most certainly use the medium preset plus DLSS on quality on the RTX 2060 mobile. But the 50 FPS on high could also be an alternative, since on an adaptive sync monitor like on my laptop, 50 FPS are still acceptable, especially for a single-player third-person game in my opinion. In Warzone 2.0, I was playing a battle royale and landed at the same spot in the middle of the map every time and walked a while until I entered two buildings in a not very crowded area. That way I was able to assure that I was more or less undisturbed while benchmarking the game, because it's really annoying if you're getting killed all the time while just trying to goddamn benchmark it. You will immediately see that activating DLSS didn't really do much in Warzone once I was testing the lower settings, as I suspect that the Ryzen 7 4800H in my laptop was becoming the bottleneck, even though it's been a very fast CPU back then, as mentioned before. So with activated DLSS, comparing the simple and the minimum preset, we are seeing the famous margin of error. And not even on the minimum preset with DLSS I was able to reach 100 FPS on average. But I have to point out that using DLSS on quality mode improved the image quality on the minimum preset, since the resolution scaling just looks way better with activated DLSS. So if you're okay with some casual gaming, the RTX 2060 is okay, but more sophisticated players would surely need or at least want higher FPS than what the RTX 2060 Mobile could deliver in this game. If I had to choose a setting, I would probably go for the simple preset with activated DLSS on quality. In Cyberpunk 2077, I was only using the integrated benchmark since it saves a lot of time doing so. And the RTX 2060 Mobile is able to deliver very playable FPS once DLSS is activated. You can clearly see that in this game it makes a big difference, even when we're using the slowest DLSS quality mode. In fact, on the Ultra preset without activated ray tracing, I was seeing an acceptable 57 FPS on average and a 1% low of 40 FPS. I personally would probably choose the high settings with DLSS though, and probably cap the FPS at 60 to improve the stability of the game a bit further. And just for the fun of it, I was also testing ray tracing in this game using the integrated benchmark. It was pretty brutal for most settings, to be honest, but on the low ray tracing setting, we're actually seeing playable frame rates with about 52 FPS on average. I think there are a lot of people out there that would consider this acceptable for a single player game, since the visuals are clearly benefiting from ray tracing in this title. The other settings should only be used for screenshots, I guess. The pretty new Hogwarts Legacy is another difficult candidate, as the game still suffers from performance issues. I was using my regular testing route, running through the Forbidden Forest from a specified point A to a specified point B. PS, the benchmark runs without DLSS were achieved with TAA on low settings. As you can immediately see, a few presets are able to hit 60 FPS on average, or at least close to it. Though the 1% lows often aren't really good due to dips, little freezes or small stutters. At least I haven't seen the infamous drastic frame drops anymore. Only on the high settings and ultra settings, the RTX 2060 Mobile was able to make an advantage of using DLSS, as I assume once more that the CPU is becoming a bottleneck here, or maybe the RAM. But of course, it is still absolutely playable, just fine all things considered. I actually sometimes play this game on this very laptop, and whenever I do, I'm using the medium preset plus DLSS and a 60 FPS cap to ensure there are little to no VRAM issues, which can cause nasty texture loading problems. On the low preset, I wasn't seeing any difference between the native and the DLSS mode though. Far Cry 6 had one of the lowest differences between the presets. I was using the integrated benchmark once more for a fairer and easier comparison between the presets. And at the same time, FSR, which I used because it does not offer DLSS, had basically no effect, at least with my laptop. So once more, it seems that the GPU is not the final bottleneck in this title. Astonishingly, all presets showed average FPS above 60, so it's really up to a personal taste which setting to use in this game. The 1% lower have mostly been alright as well, so since it's a single player title, I guess it's absolutely playable once more. In Fortnite Battle Royale, I was playing a full match and then I used the replay feature to test the different settings to ensure a perfectly matching precondition for my benchmarks, which by the way turned out to be one of my best Fortnite matches despite not winning it, lol. PS, all tests in this game have been made in the DirectX 11 mode with Lumen and Nanite turned off. So you have to know that Fortnite clearly became more demanding over the years, and that's why I included it in the new test, since the new Unreal Engine 5 really changed the game a lot. However, the maximum I saw using DirectX 12 was 190 FPS on the low preset with a suboptimal 1% low of only 114, which is quite a big difference. The low preset actually renders the game at only 50% resolution. And since DLSS on quality is rendering all presets at 60% resolution scaling, we're actually seeing worse results when it's activated. But it definitely looks a lot better and much sharper when it's activated on the lower presets. Me personally, I would probably use something between medium and high settings with DLSS since it looks better than the native resolution without any anti-aliasing. In Forza Horizon 5, I was once more using the benchmark since it's very realistic in my opinion. And I really don't know why, but for some reason DLSS wasn't really working once more, as the results were mostly identical or even a tiny bit worse with activated DLSS, which could be within the margin of error though. On the extreme preset we are clearly seeing VRAM limitation and a huge hit on the FPS as a result, but on ultra and lower settings we're getting 60 FPS or more. A short input lag and good reaction is pretty important in racing games, so I personally would prefer the high or medium preset, in this case probably even without activated DLSS. In God of War I was using my usual benchmark route with a fight scene at the end, which of course is not always perfectly identical, but I think it will do in this case. And since 60 FPS should be enough for most people in this title, we're actually seeing good results on the RTX 2060 mobile, especially with activated DLSS on quality, which usually gave a boost of around 12 to 20%. You could of course always use the balanced DLSS preset instead if that doesn't bother you, to achieve even better results. But medium and low settings were clearly above 60 FPS even without DLSS. Me personally, I once more would make use of DLSS and choose the high preset, capping the FPS at 60 to ensure a smooth and stable experience. I know, Atomic Heart is a bit controversial, but I really don't suspect the developers of being pro-war or pro-Kreml, so I'm still adding this to this test despite the main character being a complete douchebag. In my opinion, the game is pretty well optimized and delivers high FPS despite the good graphics on most systems. I was using my usual benchmark route, where I'm just walking in the starting area, since the game does not have a comfortable save game system, unfortunately. However, as you can see here, we are hitting over 60 FPS on average with almost all presets. DLSS is giving a noticeable boost on the 3 highest presets, whereas on medium and low settings there is no difference anymore, probably again due to the CPU or the RAM becoming a bottleneck. Me personally, I would probably use the ultra or the high preset with DLSS again to achieve around 72 to 75 FPS on average. And the 1% lows are mostly okay and would be higher if there wouldn't be the occasional short stutter, which could be related to the benchmark route. But overall, it feels very stable and usually has good frame times as well. The last game for today will be A Plague Tale Requiem, which is also one of the most demanding games I've tested. I was using my usual benchmark route, in which I'm just walking through a beautiful wooded area with a big meadow and some dialogue scenes. As you can see, most presets are clearly below 60 FPS on average, but once more DLSS is saving the day with a boost of around 20 to 25% improvement, even on the quality mode. Without DLSS, only using the low preset allowed for more than 60 FPS on average. Once I activated it, even the high preset was very close to a stable 60 FPS. So I personally would probably use something between medium or high settings with activated DLSS. And since the game really doesn't use a lot of VRAM, which is nice, I would always crank up the texture quality for better visuals, which has a very minor hit on the performance. Now, as a conclusion, I have to say that, as we've seen, the now over 4-year-old RTX 2060 mobile clearly is able to achieve at least 60 FPS in all the games I've tested today in one preset or the other. And sometimes DLSS is the game changer even, or especially on this 4-year-old mobile GPU if the CPU is not the bottleneck. And it's absolutely okay in my opinion to use DLSS on the highest quality mode on a laptop screen considering the image quality. I guess for many people even the balanced mode would be okay. I would always make use of that whenever possible, especially since it's also reducing the VRAM usage at least by a small amount. Okay, now that's all for today. If you like the content, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more laptop reviews and GPU comparisons if you haven't already done that. That helps a lot. Thank you very much. Also, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and tschüss.